Great, thank you. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Well, let me start this off by saying thank you, Supervisor Goodman, for this opportunity to update the citizens of Santan Valley on our work at Johnson Utility as the interim manager. I wanted to give a little background on EPCOR and who we are, just to make sure everybody that may be tuning in or looking at this later has a appreciation for EPCOR. We are a water, a wastewater, a natural gas, and water transmission utility that is currently operating in 3 states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And we have a great amount of experience in managing and operating utilities. And as well as that, we have a highly skilled and qualified staff in utility operations and management that helps us accomplish our day-to-day activities. Sorry, had a little bit of a technical issue. So here's a slide that I wanted to present as well that gives everybody an idea of the service territory that EPCOR operates in the greater Phoenix area, just to provide some context. And as you can see, we have significant operations in the West Valley up to the Northwest Valley, and then utilities in the northern part, central, and eastern part of the greater Phoenix area. And then you'll notice down in the south in the light red is the Johnson Utilities Santan Valley operations, which we've been operating since August of 2018 under our interim manager arrangement. So a little background on our role. Our involvement began with Johnson Utilities in August of 2018. We were initially contracted with the ACC, the Arizona Corporation Commission, to complete an engineering assessment of Johnson Utilities, take a look at their assets, the current condition, and any future investment that would be needed. At the end of August in 2018, we entered into an agreement with the Arizona Corporation Commission to become the interim manager of Johnson Utilities. And that agreement for interim management services for Johnson Utilities has a 3-year term. So it is set to expire in August of 2021. It's been 28 months that we've been operating Johnson Utilities as the interim manager, and I'd like to speak to some of the accomplishments that have been made. Starting off with customer satisfaction. When we arrived as the interim manager, the customer satisfaction rate was 54%. We've been able to raise that customer satisfaction rate to 88%, not only through the efforts of the EPCOR staff in operating the Johnson Utilities itself, but also in efforts that we've made to directly improve the interactions customers have with the utility. And 2 that I would like to mention are, early on in the interim manager arrangement, we established a 24/7, 365-day-a-week customer service line that would be answered by a live person. Our goal was to make sure that any customers that were calling in on evenings, weekends, or holidays would actually speak with somebody, would have the opportunity to explain what their issue is, and then we would be able to internally direct that issue for the customer to the appropriate staff within the utility so it could be responded to right away and in a timely fashion. And I think that's made some very significant improvements for the customer experience. The other component I would like to mention related to customer services, EPCOR has had the ability to leverage our customer service group that we have internally providing service to those areas that I was showing on the previous slide, the utilities that EPCOR owns, and to help implement best practices associated with customer service. And so Training that our staff received was made available to the Johnson Utilities customer service representatives. And all of this really focuses on an intent and a goal to ensure that customers, when they call the utility with a problem, that they're able to get that problem resolved immediately. I think we can all appreciate that no one wants to call any business, whether it's a utility or any other business, and have to call 4 or 5 different times about the same problem. And that is really part of the best practices that we're pushing forward, and working to make sure happens as much as it possibly can with the customers' interactions with the utility. A second accomplishment that I want to highlight is that we've added over 9 million gallons per day of additional water supply to the system. We've brought new wells online, and this additional supply has allowed us to not only avoid any outages or degradation in service levels for the customers, but also to increase pressures throughout the service territory in Johnson Utilities. Sorry, I jumped ahead. Let me get back to this one. Most importantly, I think is I would like to point out is that this additional 9 million gallons a day plus of water that we've introduced to the system allows us an appropriate level of redundancy so that we can ensure when equipment fails that customers are not experiencing a degradation in their service levels, which is very important. And in fact, the way utilities should be able to operate. We should be able to make repairs to equipment and not have it affect the service that customers have. We've also made significant infrastructure improvements and equipment investments. We've installed monitoring systems at all of the Johnson Utilities wastewater lift stations, and in fact have reorganized the Johnson Utilities staff to create what we call a collections team. Collections is the term in the utility world that we refer to used to refer to those people that focus on all of the lines and pumps associated with moving wastewater from a customer's home all the way through this extensive pipe network into the wastewater plants. This team, with its focus on this piece of the utility solely and exclusively, has allowed them to develop expertise in maintenance and proper operation of this piece of the utility, as well as the ability to respond very quickly and comprehensively to any types of upsets that we may experience. And we've seen a dramatic reduction in sanitary sewer overflows in the Johnson Utility system, and it is a target that we keep front of mind constantly to work to continue to improve that. We've also made some investments in the Section 11 wastewater treatment plant, and I do want to emphasize that everybody, I think, is aware of the Section 11 wastewater treatment plant, and the investments that we made were measured to address issues in that plant in the immediate that needed to be addressed to allow it to have the best opportunity to treat water as effectively as it possibly could. We made some improvements to lines within that plant so that water could hydraulically flow through it in the proper manner. We made improvements to the treatment process itself, the system that actually takes the wastewater and renders it as usable effluent water. And then I think equally important is we've made improvements to the odor control and odor mitigation at that plant. Now, while we understand that odors have not been completely eliminated from Section 11, we do believe quite a bit of improvement has been made in that area, and we continue to focus on that very closely as we operate on a day-to-day basis. The final thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of an accomplishment is we put a plan in place for growth. This is what we call our comprehensive planning study, and it is essentially a plan that allows us to responsibly manage and accommodate growth in the system. It identifies capital projects and investments that are needed, the timing in which those investments are needed, so that they're built at the appropriate time to accommodate growth up into from where that utility Johnson Utilities is now until it would reach full build out. So that is a very important document, and I would note that we did file that document with the Corporation Commission, so it is a public record and available to anybody that wants to access it and read it from the Arizona Corporation Commission's website. Most recently, we were able to enter a agreement with the town of Queen Creek for an interconnection between the Johnson Utilities wastewater systems and the Queen Creek wastewater system. This is an important accomplishment, and what this does is this essentially provides us with a bridge in capacity in the immediate that buys us the time to construct the infrastructure necessary in Johnson Utilities facilities and allows an appropriate and reasonable amount of growth to occur. We're estimating that the interconnection in this short term would provide the ability for an additional 5,400 new customers to connect to the system while we are able to maintain service to all of the existing customers at the same time. This slide is really just thrown in pictorially to show the vast expanse of the Johnson Utilities service territory. And I do want to say that when you look at the water service territory and the wastewater service territory of Johnson Utilities, it covers approximately 160 square miles. It's big, and it takes a lot to properly manage and operate the Johnson Utilities systems. So I'm happy to report that the system is stable, but there is a lot of work ahead of us as we move forward into the immediate upcoming years and into the longer term future. I think it's important for people to understand that since the beginning of the interim manager assignment that we took in August of 2018, $46 million has been spent making capital improvements to this plant to provide service to existing customers. In addition to that $46 million that's been spent to date, we've identified the need for an additional $138 million that will need to be invested over the next 3 years. And I've noted below that figure that there are a couple really key projects associated with that $138 million. The Copper Basin Wastewater Reclamation Facility, the Anthem and Pecan Wastewater Reclamation Facilities as well. And that includes the responsible closure of Section 11. And so I'd like to move to a couple new slides to get in a little more detail about the Copper Basin and Anthem plants and Pecan plant. Wastewater continues to be a critical need for this utility. Right now, in the short term, we need approximately 5 million gallons a day in capacity. And ultimately, at build out, we will need an additional 11 million gallons a day in capacity for the wastewater part of the utility. These investments will help us not only deal with the flows that are coming into the plant, but also help to address odor issues and overflow issues, make better improvements on sanitary sewer overflow issues within the utility. This work brings very positive outcomes for Santan Valley. We've all heard the economists and forecasters state that Santan Valley is one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing area in the United States. And this work that I'm outlining today, and that is included in our comprehensive planning study, ultimately creates the ability for the utility to add an additional 27,000 new connections in a manner and over the timing that is needed for the utility to accommodate those and maintain compliance and proper operation with all regulated requirements. In addition, and I've mentioned this a couple times, I'll mention it again, this investment also allows for the decommissioning responsible closure of Section 11. It's important to note, though, that these wastewater projects, which are very important, require funding. Now, some details about the Copper Basin plant itself. This is a plant that was planned for a while and is continuing to be planned and designed, and is the facility that will allow the closure of Section 11. This is effectively the replacement of Section 11 with a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant that will handle the flows that are currently going to Section 11, as well as additional growth as it is occurring. And you can see on this slide, I mentioned in here that we are looking at a process in which we are building the amount of capacity that is needed at the time that it is needed. The site is designed to allow for expansion of the plant, and so future pieces of the plant will be added on as the capacity needs are realized in the utility and be put online in time to meet those needs. We expect that this project alone, we're estimating right now to cost around approximately $63 million. This is a big and very, very important project for Johnson Utilities. Additionally, we need to expand the capacities of the Anthem and the Pecan wastewater treatment facilities. We're going to expand both of those wastewater plants in capacity by 1 million gallons, and Pecan is the immediate priority to perform an expansion on. We have already designed that expansion. We expect that the construction of that expansion will take 12 months, which is a very aggressive but achievable construction time frame. All we need is the funding to start that project. Following shortly after the Pecan expansion, we will be expanding the Anthem water reclamation facility by 1 million gallons. And this will unlock or provide the ability for us to provide service to an additional 5,400 customers in the Anthem Merrill Ranch area. And you can see on this slide, the timeline for that construction is 14 months. So let me just touch on what's next right now. And there are a couple important items that I think the public needs to be aware of. First, under our interim manager arrangement with the Corporation Commission, we were directed to file a rate application for Johnson Utilities, and we did that. Earlier this year, we filed a rate application with the Corporation Commission. Right now, that rate application has been essentially paused by the Corporation Commission, and their plan is to revisit that application in January and establish what they refer to as a procedural schedule, but it will be the date at which the process for handling that rate application and getting it through their administrative process begins. Also, before the Corporation Commission currently is a request from EPCOR Water, a joint request from EPCOR Water and Johnson Utilities asking the Arizona Corporation Commission to authorize the transfer of Johnson Utilities assets to EPCOR, which, if approved, EPCOR would thereby become the owner of Johnson Utilities and would be the entity responsible for all this work that I've talked about in my prior slides and piece of this presentation. A hearing was held for that application about a week or week and a half ago, and we're hopeful that the commission will make a decision on that request by the end of this month. Now, with those two important pieces of information and actions with the Corporation Commission in mind, I do want to point out that there are 8 months left in our interim manager agreement. And if things remain the way they are now, and EPCOR is to continue for the next 8 months as the interim manager, our primary focus will remain on the day-to-day operations of the utility and in making whatever improvements we are able to make between now and the end of that assignment. So with that, Supervisor Goodman, I think this would be a good time for me to hand the proverbial microphone back over to you and allow you to kind of lead the rest of this session for us.
All right, thank you. I don't think I've ever been called a proverbial before, but thank you. So I see the Santa Claus look going on. Doug, you look good, buddy. Hey, real quick on a comment that you just made in the last slide. You were talking about the agreement that your interim manager that had a 3-year contract on it. Is it my understanding that that can be renewed at the Corporations Commission discretion?
That is correct. The agreement itself had a 3-year term, but it does have provisions in it that would allow it to be renewed.
If it needs to be. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. I know some of our public has asked those questions. And I thank you guys for taking the time. This is something Troy and I have been trying to put together now for 2 or 3 months, actually, since COVID hit, to kind of get the public more involved and get more information out to them. And then in light of the acquisition that you guys, or the transfer of ownership over to you guys, we've had a lot of other questions come in to us. But what I wanted to try to do today a little bit was focus in on some of the questions, particularly related to, you were talking about the reclaim wastewater, and try to get into some of the questions there. And the panel that you put together here, I appreciate, because I understand you guys are all the experts that can answer some of the questions that we have here. So I'll just get started right off with the first question. And this one, we get inundated a lot from our public, is if there's, with all the building that's going on in Pinal County, there's a lot of talk about the shortage of water and in Pinal County and things of that nature. A lot of our public is looking at this with the shortage of water. You know, that the perception is that we're running out of water at some point. And so maybe if you guys could just take it from your perspective and from what you guys, and I see that Doug or Troy would be best to answer some of these questions. And this one in particular, if you guys could just take a minute and talk a little bit about what we know as far as our water supply and the reclaiming of water.
Sure, I guess I can start off with that. When you hear about running out of water, that's really related to the state's requirement for the Assured Water Supply Program. So before any new subdivision can even be platted, approved at the county level or at the city level, before those plats can get recorded, the landowner, the developer of that land, has to show the state that there's a 100-year assured water supply. And so what they're running into right now is the inability to do that in a fairly quick manner. Some of the previous applications that are with the Department of Water Resources, who oversees that program, are on hold right now because the department's most recent modeling of available groundwater in the Pinal area is coming up short on those 100-year projections. So that's the horizon we're looking at. These are things that will be directly impacting the supply 100 years from now. So this isn't something that's happening today.
Okay, and to go along with that, it's fair to also, and maybe to the public as a whole, a lot of the projects that are already out there have already gone through the platting process, even though they're not built out or they've even started. There's already a lot of developers and landowners out there that have gone through this platting process that is showing there's a 100-year supply of water for their locations. It's the new projects that are coming into place. Is my understanding correct there?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So there's a lot of projects that have been approved that haven't started, haven't broken out of the ground yet. So all of those can move forward. They've already shown that the water supply is there. So it's just a matter of as those landowners bring those developments to production, that those can keep going. For example, the Johnson Utilities, both of the systems, back up a hair, the way that the Department of Water Resources regulates the program is by groundwater basins. So the Pinal County actually has two main groundwater basins in it. So it's the Phoenix Active Management Area on the north side, and then the main part of the county is the Pinal Active Management Area. So the Johnson system straddles that, so the DWR regulates the two systems separately. But both of the systems are designated as having a 100-year assured water supply. So if we would go into the department right now and want to add a bunch of water to that, we would have to go through this process, and it would take some time. It would run into some of the issues that the new guys are having. But we have plenty of water already on the books, and so that's what's supporting the current growth. And so just like other projects that have been approved, we've got this pre-approval done, and so there's a 100-year supply available for us to continue to grow on in the immediate future.
Okay. Troy, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, Mike, I would add, I think Doug did a great job of the overview, but just to frame up what was said a little bit, there's two parts of Johnson Utilities. One is on the Phoenix AMA and one is in the Pinal AMA. Anthem at Merrill Ranch is in the Pinal AMA. The Pinal AMA is the AMA's active management area, is the one that we keep hearing about water shortages. The Phoenix active management area, which is the rest and most of Johnson Utilities, is actually in very good shape from assured water supply situation. So it's important to separate those two, because the bulk of Johnson Utilities has a very robust assured water supply. The part down in the Pinal AMA is a little bit more challenged, and it's being worked on, as Doug has mentioned.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the distinction between that. We're a unique county, and I think we have 3 different AMAs and 2 other locations that aren't really classified as active management areas, but that's 5 areas that we need to be looking out on the water supply. So we're pretty unique as far as the county is concerned there. Thank you. And then another question I have, what about, has there been any conversations to expand the water lines into some of the rural areas? For instance, up here off of Gary Road, where Johnson is, we get a lot of feedback from people that live back up in there. Is there any planned expansions that you guys have in place or that you're talking about to move some of your expansion or Johnson Utility expansion back up in that area?
Yeah, Supervisor Goodman, I'll take a shot at that one, and then maybe Troy can clean up on it. But I think you're talking about what we refer to as the Bonanza area of the service territory. And, we've been looking into that, and certainly in a traditional setting, a utility would be asking people to enter line extension agreements and pay portions of the cost of installing the line to get it to their house. But we understand that may not be as easy a prospect for the folks that are living up in that area as it might be for some others in different parts of the state. And so as a utility, we always do have the option to just go in and install those lines ourselves at our cost. That would go into the rate base of the utility. But that, of course, requires the adequate capital available to do that. And so I think that's kind of where we are with this right now, is if there is sufficient capital, then our plan would be to extend those lines, certainly.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Jeff, go ahead. Troy?
Yeah, I would just add, what Jeff said is right on target. The issue primarily is having the proper capital to do these types of projects. And we're in an awkward position right now because we've applied for a change of ownership. We've worked out a deal to purchase the utility, but the final approval of that we're hoping will happen end of this year. Until, or if that doesn't happen, we're really back to square one and where we are, and we've got to have people pay the full freight of bringing pipe to their house. If if EPCOR is the owner, we will not be financially constrained as we are with the current ownership. And more than likely, we would be able to just leverage the financial strength that EPCOR brings, put pipe in the ground, bring on these customers, and quit worrying about the LXA payments individually. But that would require us to be the owner of the utility.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Back when we had the hearings back in 2017 or 18, the beginning of 2018, there was a lot of discussions about people seeing on their bills CAGRID. Can one of you take a minute and explain what that is, the reason why it's there, and then take it a little bit further into credits, reclaimed water credits, and even maybe take a minute and discuss a little bit about Johnson. Have they been trying to get those credits? Have they been doing things effectively? And if so, have they been passing that off to the consumer? Anyway, if you could just take a minute and just talk a little bit about CAGRID.
Sure, I'll take first stab at that. So CAGRID stands for the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District, and it's actually tied back to that assured water supply program I mentioned earlier. The job of CAGRID is to help water providers and landowners when they go through the assured water supply process. One of the key provisions in the assured water supply is that the water supply for new growth cannot be just mined to groundwater. So you can have groundwater, you can use that as your initial source, but you have to replace that water to maintain the balance in the aquifer. So water providers like Johnson or who's become designated, or the individual landowners can join the CAGRD, and the groundwater that they pump and use then is replenished by the district. And then the cost of that is then transmitted back to those members. Johnson is what's called a member service area, so it's the entire designation, the entire system is part of that process. So the bill from the GRD goes straight to Johnson, and then that is passed through to the individual customers based on the amount of water that they use over the course of the year. So what Johnson is doing, we've been doing so far is during that designation process, there's a certain amount of free credits, other flexibility to allow a certain amount of groundwater use to happen without having to be replaced by the GRD, but not all of it. So it's a small percentage. What we've been doing, the utility's been doing so far up to this point is really been living on those existing credits, those existing free giveaways. This year, that was the last. They used up the last of those existing flexibility credits that they had. So looking into the future, the only way that we're going to be able to offset the increase in costs for that is to participate in more recharge programs to be able to get more water back in the ground. So at all of the reclamation facilities, the utility has been recharging the effluent, the reclaimed water into the ground. And then you can pump that later. You get credits for that storage. So those long-term storage credits then can be recovered by the utility, and they're not counted against that groundwater use. So you can offset a lot of that. The permits that have been issued by the Department of Water Resources for those recharge sites have certain limitations on them. And we're in the middle right now of going through and maximizing to make sure that all the water we're putting into the ground is getting credit. What we found out is there have been some improvements that have been made that have not been approved by the department. So we're not getting 100% credit of all the water we're putting back in the ground. So we're on a really high speed, high important program right now to get the department to review all of those, make sure that they agree with how they're functioning hydrologically, so we can maximize all those credits, and that way we can reduce the GRD impacts to the customers in the future. I'll turn it over to Troy or Jacob on some of the other details that we're working on.
I've got nothing to add to that excellent explanation.
Jacob, how about you? You're just sitting there smiling right now. You're going to stay out of this one.
No, I can't follow up on that either. I can assure you though that there is several projects and efforts to get that water back in the ground. So, and those are efforts in some of the design at Pecan, as well as rehabbing some of the existing systems. So,
And to that, my understanding with some of these the items that you have on improvements at these different locations is to increase the capacity to actually recharge some of that treated water, put it back into the water table, correct?
that is correct. Yeah. No, we've rehabbed probably 90% of our injection wells, our Vados wells. And some of that's operational control too, which we are limited on. I mean, in the winter months, our focus becomes keeping the water off site so that we don't have, I think historically they've had some issues with capacity and holding on to effluent and having spills into the wash or even into the road at times. So in the winter months, we're trying to push a lot of that water off the property, which limits our ability to put that water back into the ground, which kind of highlights the importance to design some of those infrastructures so that we can ultimately get the water back into the ground. So,
okay, thank you. This one's a little bit related to something you've already touched on and discussed a little bit about the connections, the interconnections with Queen Creek. With that, can you take a little bit more time and explain how important that was really, not only to the current capacity that we have, and Jeff, you mentioned something about the overflows that we've had, I can't even remember the acronym that they use, of the sewer overflows in these plants, but how that might help offset any future flows and then even have the ability to increase construction here.
You want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. I think the interconnect with the town of Queen Creek is very important for continued growth in the area primarily. It's an interconnect for treated effluent. So Mike, I'm not sure it'll help. Well, the sanitary sewer overflows, SSOs, I think you were looking for. Those have largely been controlled. I mean, we see a few here and there, but nothing out of the ordinary that you wouldn't expect on a normal operating, well-run utility. But the interconnect is primarily for growth to continue and new hookups to continue.
Okay. With all the needed improvements that needed to take place, what has been your biggest obstacle that you've had to overcome over the last 28 months to get to where we need to be? Which you come a long ways, by the way, I need to add.
Thanks. You know what, Jeff, do you want to take a first shot at this, or do you want me?
I'll take the opportunity to highlight some of the areas of focus, but then I think you can get to the essence of what's been the biggest challenge. And so obviously, Supervisor Goodman, when we started out there, our primary focus was water. We knew we had evaluated the wastewater plants. We had an idea of what we were dealing with, but we also knew that there were outages of water, and we understand the importance of potable water and availability to people. And we were hearing a lot of stories about people that would say they couldn't flush their toilet on the second story of their house at night, and some very low pressure areas. And so that was our big focus for at least the first 12 months. I don't want to make it sound like we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. We were working on the wastewater system, but the big capital projects were designed to address the water supply. That was our biggest challenge. But now we're staring down an even bigger challenge in terms of wastewater. And, overarchingly, I think the one of the larger challenges has just been available.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would just emphasize that we've done an incredible amount of work in the last 28 months, and I think most of the customers have realized the benefits of that work, and that's come at a cost of $46 to $48 million in just capital. Those are just capital costs. But now we're less than $4 million left in the bank. We can't start any big capital projects. The financing of the capital plan is probably our biggest hindrance going forward, Supervisor Goodman, and really would be if the asset purchase doesn't go through, if we're not allowed to acquire for some reason, we would seriously have to consider not taking on another term as interim manager unless the financing could be worked out, because without capital financing, this utility can't continue to make the improvements that it needs.
Okay. Well, and with that, there is, as far as the county's involvement, what can we do better to help you guys in number one? Let me back up a second and just first of all tell you how much we appreciate you guys coming in here. I know you've felt the hamstring of everything, and you're where you wanted to make the improvements and felt and saw the need to make those improvements. You were pushed from all sides legally. I'll be the one to step out there and say we're part of the biggest problem has been in the current ownership and things of that nature. And all of our public here, they get that, they understand that. And then in regards to the acquisition or the transfer of ownership and the arrangements and the agreements behind the scenes there's a lot of uncertainty or a lot of not enough information that the public is finding and that they're trying to look at here. And that's kind of the feedback we're getting. At a later time, I know this is something that we didn't talk about earlier, but I'd like you guys, we have a lot of questions that are being asked. And would you be opposed to me sending those information over to you, Troy, you guys taking that? There's a lot of questions because it's so convoluted. And to the lay person, first of all, there were so many individuals that the length time and the time of the day that those hearings were done, they weren't able to be a part of it. They weren't able to listen to it. And quite honestly, you and I both know you sit there, you listen to that stuff for 8-hour day for a week or two, and it gets a little bit daunting, especially if you don't completely comprehend. And so if you guys would be willing to do that. The other thing is, I know that we've got a lot of requests from our public to have an open discussion out here by the ACC. I want you to think about that and see if that's something that you guys would be willing to support and be a part of as we get the Arizona Corporation Commission, and we're working on them now, to come out here and do something. With COVID and everything, it's going to be limited on what we can do in one of their meetings. So I'd like you to think about that as well. But to kudos to you guys and everything that you've done thus far and the improvements that we've seen as a whole, it's night and day. It's night and day. So Troy, go ahead.
Well, thanks, Supervisor Goodman. A lot said there. I'll try to take it apart a little bit. The county has been very helpful and supportive in all our efforts, and we want to thank you for that as well. And in particular, you, Mike, you've been hands-on involved. I've been in meetings with you with DEQ and with the ACC, you're at these agencies and you're pounding your fist on the desk and saying we've got to see some change, and it's had its impact for the better. I think your role personally has helped push us to where we are right now. Regarding questions that people may have about the asset purchase, absolutely send them over to us. It is a very complicated transaction. This is a large utility, and as many folks know, there are many different affiliated companies with Johnson Utilities. So unwinding those things, it creates its own challenge, and so anybody who sat through 3 days of those hearings, which I did, you need a week's vacation just to recover from, and hopefully the brain damage isn't permanent, and I'm not sure that's not the case. But feel free to send those to us. We'll answer what we can. And you mentioned a public meeting from the ACC, we'd be happy to participate. I think COVID does present real challenges, but if we can do something in a forum like we have here, I can see no reason why that shouldn't work. Just real simply, I will try to make a complicated issue very simple, and it probably will fall flat, but EPCOR is trying to purchase all of the assets of Johnson Utilities, and there's an agreed upon purchase price for that. We have to separate all of the other affiliated companies. We're buying the assets of Johnson Utilities only. For that to work, because, and if you listen to the consumer advocate's expert witness, he said this utility has had all the money taken out of it and run down, and it's not really worth anything. That's coming from the utilities consumer advocate, their witness. It's called rate base. This utility has very little to no rate base, and that's how the Corporation Commission decides on how rates are set and how companies can earn on it. So a utility that doesn't have rate base or sufficient rate base, it's a very difficult acquisition. Normally you'd buy out the rate base, and that is what it is. The rates shouldn't change. Customers should see a seamless transition, no problem. Because there's no rate base, this becomes more complicated. So we put in an acquisition adjustment that was changed to a deferred debit. That is basically just a replacement of rate base. So that we said we needed $49 million of a surrogate rate base and that was negotiated down by both RUCO and the ACC to $45 million. So we're saying it's a $45 million rate base moving forward. That's still really light for a utility of this size. EPCOR has agreed to forego $10.5 million of post-test year plant. So we're doing our part to help reduce the impact to customers on this acquisition. I probably tried to simplify and made it more complicated, so I apologize. But we hear everybody's concerns about having to pay twice. We're doing what we can. We feel like we've given a lot to try to make this acquisition work, and we'll keep trying. But send any questions you have on this to us, Mike, and we'll do what we can with them.
Okay. And there is one question that I myself have that I think you may not be. I'd like you to weigh in on it, but I know you're not the one that would really have the answer to this. But when you talk about no rate base, for me personally, I'd like to, and I'll send you these two questions, but one is, how did that get to that point? Who is responsible for allowing that to happen in the first place? And second of all, my question would be specifically identifying, would that be the ACC that would be responsible for that from years ago and those type of things? And so and I don't know if you want to take a second on that. I know it's kind of a muddy situation for you, but that's a question I'm going to be posing to the ACC myself, asking that particular question if there's no rate base now, how did it happen and what are they going to be doing for the future to prevent this ever happening again?
Yeah, and I hate to take the political way out here, Mike, but I would say that's probably not a question for us.
Okay. Well, and I figured that, but I do know that that's one of myself and many other constituents here have asked that question. So, but you know, to reiterate to you guys, the difference between what we've had in the past and what we are today is night and day. And we express our gratitude to you guys on behalf of the citizens here, what you've done thus far. We don't necessarily agree with a lot of some of the things, Troy, you and I've had a number of conversations. We do agree that the change is needed and the changeover in ownership needs to occur. How we get there, though, is probably where we have some disagreements. We need to work through some of those issues. And we know, I know we've got a lot of my constituents out here that would like to weigh in on that. And so that's one of the things moving forward, we'd like to do some kind of another public forum, but with the commissioners in that setting with them. So, and I'm glad to hear that you'd be supportive of that and even be a part of that panel. So we appreciate that. Is there, if there's nothing else to add, I'm pretty much done. On behalf of the citizens here in the Santan Valley area, I want to thank you guys for allowing us to be a part of this, allowing me to be a part of your Zoom meeting and meeting with our public, and I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Hey,
Supervisor.
One more thing. Merry Christmas.
Likewise.
Merry Christmas.
To you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Is it over?